Tonight we're in the studio with an accomplished 26 years of experience workers' comp attorney. This is James Mogul to my immediate left. I'd like to introduce him, and tonight our show is going to be about workers' compensation. And you can call us here at the studio. The number is 610-378-0426. We're going to start talking about workers' compensation and what we see in practice. And you can call in and ask us questions as we go along. But I would like to point out a couple of different things. One is, I don't know, I've seen some older attorneys that have maybe a little bit more experience, but usually they're retired. I haven't seen somebody with 26 years of experience. That's a long time to be doing workers' compensation.
Yes, it is, but I enjoy it. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me on the show, Doctor.
You're welcome. We're glad you're here. Now, when people, we want to go over a basic workers' compensation case. When people come in to see us, they often say things like, well, you know, I just slipped and fell. I didn't think I needed to report it. I got up. I was a little sore the next day. But then a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, the pain comes back. And we find people often come into us and they haven't reported their workers' compensation injury. They have 2 years or 3 years, but that, or was it 90 days? How long do you have to report your injury?
Well, you have 120 days to report your injury, Doctor, but it's always better to report it immediately. The longer you wait, the more skeptical that the employer and ultimately the workers' compensation insurance company are that you really injured yourself. So even if you don't think it's a big deal and you fell and hurt yourself, it's always better to fill out a written accident report and be as truthful and as detailed as possible and make sure you get a copy.
And the written accident report, too, I have a joke I tell patients. I was telling you about it. Reagan used to say when he was dealing with the Russians during the Cold War, trust but verify.
Absolutely.
And that means you need to get the piece of paper from your employer that says they filed it, and I guess it goes to Harrisburg?
Well, they're supposed to file it with the insurance company who's supposed to file it with Harrisburg,
oh, okay.
The Bureau of Workers' Compensation in Harrisburg. But make sure they do it. Don't rely on them doing it, and don't. It's better not to let them write the report. A lot of times I see situations where the employer actually does the writing of the report and the claimant just signs it.
Oh. That's
probably not a good idea.
So they can actually give you the accident report and you can put your own verbiage on the report?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. And make sure you tell them that you hurt yourself and be as accurate and inclusive as possible with your injuries.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other thing. We were talking about this earlier. Many times it seems like I only see people who are what I call the walking wounded. The ones who know they can't go back to work, they've tried the company doctors, whatever, and we'll talk about that 90-day company doctor thing in a minute. But then they say, I went to the company doctor, and they say I'm fine, and they sent me back to full duty, and I can't even get out of bed. So those are the kind that we see, and the thing that I was talking to Mr. Mogul about here earlier that always amazed me, I've been in practice for 21 years. He's got me by a good 4 or 5 years here. But the thing is, I always thought all doctors wore white hats. I always thought that no matter what happened, they'd always tell you the truth. And here I find out that sometimes if I say the glass is half empty, they'll say the glass is half full. So people, and you in your newsletters and your briefings for people, and you have a website too for the firm that you work with, which is Lowenthal and Abrams. And you can contact, we got to give them that website. You can contact Mr. Mogul at the office, or you can contact him online, and he can answer these questions. In fact, you were saying that somebody, you had talked to people earlier, and they had called 2 other attorneys, and the other attorneys wouldn't even talk to them unless they had signed a contract.
That's correct. Well, I'm always happy to talk to people and give them advice. And if they become clients, that's wonderful. And if they don't, that's fine too. Mm-hmm. But I spoke to a lady just last night who said she had spoken to 2 other attorneys who wouldn't even give her any advice at all or talk to her unless she signed a written contract retaining them to represent her. And we don't do that. If people are hurt at work and they have questions, I'm happy to talk to them, either by email or by phone, and give them whatever advice I can. And they certainly don't have to be clients.
Yeah, that's something that's wonderful these days. And let's go ahead and give them the website while we're thinking of it so I do this right. James, your first name, at LOWABRAM.com.
Right, James at lowabram.com.
Good. And we'll get back to that. We'll give it out a couple of times because this is a community television program, and this is the type of information that you need to have as a general member of the community. The old saying is knowledge is power, and the more you have an understanding of these things, the better off you are. Unfortunately, most patients go into these things in a virginal type of atmosphere because you don't have a workers' comp injury all the time. And after you go through this once and get burned, perhaps, then you'll learn not to do it that way again. And that's not the way the system was designed. You were saying earlier the system was designed so it originally wouldn't even need attorneys.
The system was originally designed because they didn't want people to sue their employers for pain and suffering. They thought that would be bad for business, so they designed a no-fault system where if you get hurt at work, your employer is going to take care of you. They're going to pay your wage loss benefits, which are generally 2/3, not always, but generally, and your medical bills until you get better. And you weren't even supposed to need an attorney, and litigation was only supposed to be a last resort. Of course, in practical fact, of the 26 years I've been doing this, all I do is workers' compensation litigation because the employers don't tell people the truth. The insurance companies do not pay valid claims. They don't give people the proper medical treatment. They don't give them their wage loss benefits, so they have to hire lawyers and litigate. And it's just as much litigation as any other area, or more.
Yeah. Well, before we forget, too, I want to remind people this is a live show. If you have any questions, you can call us here at the studio at 610-378-0426. And I believe they'll put it up there on the screen, too. I have to put my spectacles on. Yep, there it is. Okay. Good. All right. The other thing that we were talking about, we wanted to walk through the basic workers' comp process, and then we'll talk about other things that happen as we go along. Now, if you're injured at work, you make an accident report, you get a copy of it, you can write your own words down on it. Then they send you to their doctors.
Correct.
Now, there's supposed to be a list posted somewhere, or the employee, when they're hired, signs a list, and then every time they're hurt or injured and they make an injury report, then they're supposed to be given that list of physicians that they can go see.
Correct. There's supposed to be a written list, and it's supposed to be accessible to everyone. It's supposed to be posted in a place where everybody goes to, like a lunchroom or a place where you clock in. It's not supposed to be locked in your boss's desk. And there should be at least 6 different providers on the list, and they can't all be from the same facility.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to acknowledge that you receive that list, and each time you get injured, they're supposed to give you that list. And I will say right now that most employers do not have valid lists of doctors.
Yeah.
I'll just say that right now. Most employers just simply say, if you get injured, go to this place or go to that place. And most people don't know the difference, so they do what their employer tells them to do because they want to be a good employee.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to do that, though. If they don't have a valid list, then you're free to go to any doctor you want. And
on that list, too, we learned a few years back that there's supposed to be one doctor of chiropractic on that list.
Yes.
Because back injuries are so prevalent in work-related environments, so we see a lot of those.
And also, if your specialty is not, not every medical specialty, obviously, can be on a list of 6 doctors.
Right.
So if your particular specialty is not on that list, then, of course, then you're free to go to anybody you want, because the law doesn't say you can be denied treatment for 90 days. It just says if they have a valid list and you want them to pay for it, then you need to go to one of those doctors for the first 90 days. And you can also switch doctors on the list. If you start with a certain doctor and you don't like that doctor and you want to go to somebody else on the list, you're allowed to do that also.
Yeah, and that's, again, we see patients that kind of get led down that path and they are not aware that they have this right. And oftentimes when attorneys have these cases, sometimes I've had the attorney for the insurance company say, well, we're not going to listen to that doctor because he's not on the list.
Right.
Well, if they don't have the employee's signature, then it's all invalid to begin with.
It's all invalid to begin with, and a lot of times they don't have a list of 6 real different doctors. A lot of times they're all from the same 1 or 2 facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you can always go to your own doctor if you want to in the first 90 days. The only consequence is if they do have a valid list, and most do not, the only consequence is that the insurance company would not have to pay the bills for the first 90 days, but you can certainly use your other health insurance if you have it to do that.
And it all comes down to that current signature for the timely signature that they should have on file for you for when you made your accident report?
Well, the other thing too, doctor, is that if you go to the doctor on the list and he releases you, then you're certainly free to go to your own doctor, because you cannot be denied treatment for 90 days.
Okay.
So if you go to the company doctor and they release you after a couple of weeks and you don't feel that that's valid and that you're still injured, you have the right then to go to see your own doctor, because they can't deny you treatment. If the doctor refuses to see you and says that you're released and you don't feel that's true, then you can go to anybody you want.
While we're on the topic of doctors, oftentimes when patients or your clients are in a workers' comp injury, they're sent to go to the company doctor for independent medical exams. They call them IMEs. And we were talking about how many times the doctors don't even look at the films. They ask you as the client or the patient to bring your films with you. And I have trouble doing that sometimes, because if I'm going to get the films from a patient and there's been MRIs or X-rays, I have to get the patient's signature. Then I have to fax it to that particular facility and then request it, you know. But IME doctors or independent medical doctors and workers' comp seem to be lazy, and they want to kind of go around that.
Well, every letter, or almost every letter that my clients get for an IME, and I call them insurance medical examinations, not independent, because we all know they're not independent, says that they're supposed to bring all their films and all their records. There's nothing in the law that says that they have to do that. They just have to present themselves. If the insurance company wants them to review films or records, the insurance company is very powerful and has a lot of resources and wealth, and they can certainly supply them to the doctors. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's my client's responsibility to run around to all their doctors and supply the IME doctor with their films and the reports.
Oftentimes they ask you to sign documents too. If they say, oh, we're coming up on a break here, we're going to take a short commercial and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.